guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbors Trespassed and Stole Exotic Plants Worth Over $8,400 from My Property. They got busted. TLDR. I plant in a greenhouse all sorts of plants that are exotic and tropical as my hobby. One day they start going missing and I get cameras installed to see what is happening. Turns out a neighbor is stealing all the expensive exotic ones and trying to sell them online for profit. I get her arrested and she has to pay fines, pay me for what she stole that was damaged, and was put on probation for a year. I got new plants and haven't had an incident since. Gardening has always been a huge hobby of mine, and when I found out that I medically couldn't work anymore, I wanted to do something nice for myself. So, I made a greenhouse on my property and decided that I would put more time and effort into gardening. My greenhouse was filled with all sorts of exotic and tropical plants that are not native to where I live. It took extensive research just to look into how to take care of them, but it is a love for me, and nothing makes me happier. The only thing with these plants is that they are very expensive, and like I said, I can't work anymore due to a debilitating illness. Sometimes just my couple hours in the greenhouse takes all the energy I have. My solution to this was try and sell some of the offspring of the plants that I bought and didn't have the room for. I would sell them for a small profit and give the people instructions on how to care for them. It wasn't enough to even be considered a small business, and I really only sold to family and friends that I think just wanted to give me the money because of how happy gardening made me. Where I live it is almost like a desert, so these lively tropical plants are not something common you would find aren't here, even in nurseries and such. Now one of the things my illness causes is that sometime my memory gets a little off, so I wasn't sure that I noticed what was really happening at first. I would go into the greenhouse and go to tend to a plant only to see that it was gone. I assumed that I must have sold it away by accident or moved it to a different part of the greenhouse to get more and less sun. The more this happened though, the more that I knew it wasn't me and they were being taken out of my greenhouse without me knowing or even seeing what was going on. I also noticed a pattern to the plants that kept going missing and figured out pretty quickly what was going on. Now I have a wide range of plants in there, from local ones that you can get anywhere that I am fond of all the way to exotic ones that aren't always even found in my country and take a very experienced person to manage. You could probably guess right away what the pattern was, and that the local stuff wasn't going anywhere while the most exotic and expensive plants seemed to be disappearing every few days. I had no idea what was going on and who would possibly want to do this to me. Everyone seemed friendly enough, and so I asked my friend to come over and please help me install some video cameras so even when I couldn't watch with my own eyes, I could see what was going on. That very night I saw someone go into the greenhouse and back out with one of my favorite plants. It wasn't even that exotic or expensive, but it had the same look that made it seem tropical and far away. I was very upset and watched the video again to pause when the person faced where I could see them. It turned out that it was a neighbor that lived a few houses down that was a little bit infamous in the neighborhood. Now she wasn't exactly a bad person, and I wouldn't have taken her as a direct thief. She was just one of those people that kept getting involved in pyramid schemes and door-to-door sales jobs where she would constantly come to people's homes and annoy them. So, nobody saw her as threatening or willing to do anything illegal. She was just a pest that everyone could see from a mile away and try to avoid. She couldn't really understand either why I didn't want to do her scheme, which would involve me going door to door selling things even after I explained that I medically couldn't work anymore. Anyway, I thought that I would try going to speak to her first to see why she was going into my backyard and stealing from me. I went and knocked on her door only for her to ironically ignore me. She would always complain when people didn't answer the door for her. So that walk was exhausting for me and a total waste of time, so I decided I would go back to my house and try to figure out what to do after I short rest. I talked to my friend, and she suggested I call the police because neighbor technically trespassed and stole many expensive plants. She also asked if I had a record of what was stolen and how much I paid for them. So, I sent the video of her stealing them along with a log of what they were and the cost of them to the police. While it was a crime, it wasn't emergent, which I understand, so it looks about half a day before an officer came to my door and I could talk to him. I explained the whole situation and took him back to my greenhouse where he was very impressed with the work I had been doing. He said that he would look into it and went over to neighbor's house while I went back inside mine and waited for an update. I got a call that they got a warrant on probable cause and found all the exotic plants she stole sitting in her garage. Based on a computer history as well, she was clearly trying to sell the plants and make a large profit off of them. What she stole ended up coming out to $8,400 and she was arrested for trespassing and theft. The plants she stole a couple days ago were able to be returned, but the rest were in bad condition. They clearly weren't being taken care of and were dead beyond healing. Some I had been taking care of for years too, so I was devastated that she ruined them and didn't seem to care at all. She didn't end up going to jail because it was her first offense, and my area was trying to cut back on sending people to jail that only committed small crimes. So instead, she was forced to pay large court fines, pay me back for all the plants that were ruined as well as being on probation for a year. So, if she got into any trouble with anyone, she was probably going to be sent back to jail. I used the money to try and replace what I could, but some I couldn't find for sale and had to hold on to the money and wait. My family and friends also wanted to help, so they bought me some local plants that I didn't already have to help fill my greenhouse even more without giving me too much work to do. Many of the basic plants just needed their irrigation watering and sunlight, so all I needed to do was check on them. The cameras haven't picked up anything but some small animals since that day, so I guess she learned her lesson about stealing my plants. The next story is titled, Confronted My Karen Neighbor About Continued Harassment. My neighbor, Lori from across the street, has been harassing me about my dog since I moved in, 2 months ago. She has left a note on my door. She has left a bag of dog food with instructions on how to feed my dog. She has let my dog loose twice. She has trespassed onto my property to feed my dog on numerous occasions. I finally had it after animal control came to my house today to check on the malnourished state of my dog, and I collected paperwork necessary to file for a PPO. It's rather insulting. My dog is not malnourished by any means, but she is skinny. She's a husky and she only weighs 36 pounds, but she's only 1 and the vet says she's healthy. I took the evidence, printed pictures/screenshots, across the street, and I told Lori, the vet says my dog is healthy and I would appreciate if the harassment would stop. And the woman acted as though she didn't even know what I was talking about. What harassment? I'm not harassing you. So, I pulled out my papers. I said, I have a picture here of the bag of dog food you left on my porch, and I have evidence that you've trespassed onto my property. She stuttered a bit, then said, oh, the dog food? That was just extra I had. I continued with, you are 65 years old, and you have no business trespassing onto my property to feed my dog. She said, yeah I do. Animal control was just at your house, and they said your dog was malnourished. Your dog is always yipping and yapping, and you don't ever do anything with it. I informed her that I do run with my dog rather frequently, that the vet says my dog is healthy, then I called her a B and told her to get a hobby. It felt empowering, but now I have a sign in my front yard that reads, no trespassing, Lori. Update. My next door neighbors love my sign and just informed me that they have had similar issues regarding this neighbor. I feel proud for what I have done today. The next story is entitled Neighbor Wants Workers to Unseal the Road so he could get out. I live in an HOA community. We actually have a good HOA. I know, shocking. This is about my entitled neighbor, one of many stories. Let's call him Dan. No one in the community likes Dan. Dan unfortunately lives right across from me. A month ago, we get a message from the HOA that they will be doing an asphalt seal coat on the roads in our community. They split it into 3 sections. 1 day for each section. They said it will take about 11.5 hours, 7:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. So we needed to plan accordingly for the day the work will be done. For people who need to use their cars during the road work, they needed to move their cars to a nearby street, which is less than a 1-minute walk. They sent several emails, mailed everyone a letter, and posted notices on everyone's door, garage door, and common areas. Pretty impossible to notice, unless you're Dan. At about 7:45 a.m. the workers start taping off areas to get ready. 8 a.m., the tar like goo starts going down. These guys work fast. One machine lays down the thick liquid and 3 guys come in and spread it evenly. It's quite ASMR friendly, as it's like watching someone color law. Anyways, it takes the workers about 1 hour to get to my part of the road. At about 9 a.m., I hear yelling outside. I look out the window and Dan is yelling at the workers from his garage. Dan is trying to get out and pissed he can't now unless he wants that tar-like goo to get on his precious truck. He starts ordering the workers to scrape off the coat so that he can leave. I have no clue if that's possible, but they had already passed Dan's house plus about 20 yards past his house. The foreman comes over to talk to Dan. The foreman tells Dan he's not going anywhere and that he was notified several times. In fact, the foreman points to the notice taped next to his garage door that Dan is standing 6 feet from. A notice that's been there 4 to 5 days. Dan makes excuse after excuse. He says that the HOA should have knocked on his door to let him know. More shouting occurs and Dan starts threatening to sue. The foreman doesn't care, he's doing his job. He warns Dan that if drives on the coat, he'll be responsible for his own damages and more. Dan throws another tantrum and eventually retreats back to his home. The next story is titled, "Neighbor Kid Stole My Bike. And he destroyed it rather than give it back." Back when I was a kid, my family didn't have a lot of money. So, we didn't have a lot of things new. We always had older video game systems, clothes that were hand-me-downs or from secondhand stores, and the same was for toys. I never had a new bike. Not now or as a kid. I like getting a used bike and giving it a second chance at life by fixing it up. At least that's recycling. I've given away a few to neighborhood kids as well. And it always makes me happy to see them happy. Most people these days just walk into a mart of walls and walk out with any old bike from there. It's sad that bikes are so easily thrown away and forgotten. In some countries they are such a common form of transportation that even lawyers ride them to work. And you can bet that in some places, having a functional bike is almost like having a car. My point being that to a kid, a bike is like their car. And that's why I believe every kid should have a bike. New or used. But I digress. For my 10th birthday my parents got me a red Huffy BMX. It wasn't new and had been bought off a friend of my parents since their kid had outgrown it. I loved that bike and rode it for a whole year. Didn't have to do anything to it other than lube the chain with some used motor oil my dad kept in the garage. But a few houses down from us a new family moved in, and they were all terrible people. The parents were heavy drinkers, and they didn't do anything to watch their son who was a year older than me. I think his name was Ed, but I'm not sure. It's been 20 years. But Ed was a bully, plain and simple. I wasn't usually his target though because I didn't have much of anything he wanted. Except for my bike. But not until he wrecked his first. Ed's dad backed over his bike with his truck and crushed it. I felt sorry for Ed at the time. But later not so much. After about a week Ed came up to me and demanded my bike while I was riding it. He was bigger than me and shoved me off to take it and ride away. I went crying to my parents, and they went to talk to Ed's parents while threatening to call police if Ed didn't give the bike back. But Ed was gone for hours with my bike, and his parents were of no help. When Ed finally came back, we demanded he return my bike. But he brushed me off. He'd hidden the bike somewhere and refused to give it back. So, my parents told Ed's parents that they'd call police right away if Ed didn't get the bike back by the next day. They told Ed to give my bike back, he refused and ran off. He came back the next morning and dropped what was left of my bike on the front lawn. It looked like it had been run over. Ed laughed at me and said I couldn't ride it now. My parents ended up calling police, and confronted Ed's parents. We wanted them to pay to replace the bike, but they made a big scene about it and even said we'd have to sue them. The cops who were there broke things up, and told them they'd have to replace the bike, and we could press charges if we wanted to. Ed's entitled father actually said they couldn't prove anything, because no one had proof other than just saying Ed did it. Ed had a big shit-eating grin when his dad said that. But my parents pointed out that the neighbor who lives across the street had cameras, and they'd already talked to him about getting the footage of Ed stealing my bike. And the cameras likely got video of Ed bringing the bike back smashed. Ed's smug look went to panic pretty quickly. There ended up being more yelling. Ed's parents grounded him and sent him crying to his room, then negotiated with my parents. Ed's dad left and came back with a replacement bike for me. It was used, and apparently from a garage sale. But it was also a Huffy and rode good. I saved the tires and tubes from my other bike Ed destroyed, as well as any other salvageable parts. I rode that blue bike till I was 14 and then upgraded to a bigger bike since I was growing fast. When I outgrew the blue bike, I gave it and my old helmet to the son of another family that were friends of my parents that were also in a similar financial situation. And the boy loved it. There is a bit of added funny karma here though. Ed did get another bike. Don't know if he stole it, or someone got it for him. But his bullying of other kids made them want revenge. They got a hold of some pink spray paint and painted Ed's bike in the middle of the night. Ed always left his bike sitting in his front yard, so it was easy to grab. The next day Ed went around accusing everyone of painting his bike. But no one admitted to it. He actually demanded to use my bike, until I reminded him what happened last time. He threatened to beat me. I reminded him we'd call police. So, he grumbled and left me alone. Ed's parents refused to get him another bike, and we saw him spend 2 days trying to scrub the pink off his. And he later spray painted it red and gray. Found out he stole a couple cans of spray paint from a neighbor's garage. And he got in trouble for that as well. But that's not really a big story, as the neighbor didn't press charges and just said he would if Ed ever trespassed on his property again. Ed's family only lived in the neighborhood for about a year before they moved away. Don't know if they got evicted, but probably. Ed was a bad troublemaker that bullied other kids and took their stuff. So, police got called a few times to make him return things. Once they were gone, I didn't ever hear anything about them again. The last story is titled, "Neighbor kept parking across my driveway. Got a ticket." This happened decades ago when my kids, now middle-aged, were little, long before the internet, camera phones, etc. So, I was living in a rental house with a driveway, no garage, and I didn't drive myself, but I was expecting a friend over from out of town. I called the non-emergency line about people constantly parking across my driveway and was told I was entitled to 20 feet either side, and given a number to call, as I told the person I had put up signs, but people kept tearing them down. Tickets were $20, quite a good bit in those years. So came the day my friend was due, and someone was across my driveway. I called the number. About 2 hours later there was a banging on my door. Opened it to find entitled neighbor, hereafter referred to as N. Brandishing ticket. Are you the person who called the cops and got me ticketed? Me. Pointing to car. That your car? N. Yes. Me. Yup, I'm the one. N. You could have just come over and asked me to move. Me. Funny, I didn't see the brass name plate with your name and address. N. I live right here. Gesturing, I always park around here. Me. Yeah, I know, and you're always parking across my driveway. N. Sad face. Sputtering. This is the first time I've parked across your driveway. Me. Well, at $20 a pop, I bet it's the last time, too. She stormed off but quit parking across my driveway. For the rest of the time I lived there, the driveway was kept clear. I guess word got around. Thanks for listening.